Welcome, friends and fellow horse fiends. You've landed on Come Ride With Me, a podcast dedicated to helping you find harmony, joy, and success in your riding. I'm your host, Anna Fox of Equus Enlightened. This pod isn't about training your horse, but about training you to be the best partner for your horse. Listen to find out how I use my intention to direct my ride. You'll hear how I decide what to focus on, what to say yes to, and when to redirect my horse. You'll see how not getting frustrated or overwhelmed is the easiest path to sanity and harmony. So, what are you waiting for? Come ride with me. Hey horse fiends, thanks for joining me this week. We are talking about balance, and that is because last week's episode was a lesson that I took, and the theme of it was pretty much balance and how that can actually help affect your horse's way of going and their mindset, their quietness as well. So if you haven't listened to that, you might want to go back and listen to it. Either way, we're going to roll into talking about balance and how that is a vital part of our riding and our everyday life. Thanks for being here. As I was thinking about doing this week's episode, I thought to myself, balance is vital. And we hear that a lot in many different aspects of our lives, not just in riding, right? And sometimes we get really, really tired of hearing it. I totally agree. But when we talk about riding, balance, poise, stability, steadiness, these are all attributes that we crave in the saddle. But sometimes they seem really elusive. Funnily enough, many of us covet the same qualities in our everyday lives, and yet they remain just out of reach there, too. So, is there a way that we can refine our balance, better our balance in the saddle, and then allow that to come into our own everyday, non-riding, non-horsey lives? I think there is. I'm working on it myself. When I was rewatching my lesson to produce last week's podcast, it reminded me just how important balance is while we're riding. And that is what got me thinking about how often we hear the word balance. So according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, balance has 9 different definitions as a noun and 7 as a verb. With so many definitions, it's no wonder we hear the word balance thrown around so much, right? Balance is one of those buzzwords we hear thrown around when people are talking about living a fulfilled life. Balance work and family, balance chores and fun, balance bad foods and good foods, balance spending money and saving money. The list just goes on, right? It's exhausting when you think about it, but it shouldn't be. The same as riding shouldn't be exhausting. When you're balanced, riding is easy and light. So how do we find the balance and that ease and lightness? I feel like if balance was such an easy thing to accomplish, then we wouldn't hear about it all the time. Everyone would be living in balance and harmony. There would be an ease and lightness about the world. Sadly, that often isn't the case. Maybe we can't change the whole world, but we can change how we live our own lives, and certainly we can find balance in one thing. So why not start with riding and see what you learn from that? I can tell you that I was a little surprised at the beginning of my lesson when Felicitas asked what other sports or activities I did. I don't think I've ever had a riding instructor ask me that, but it is something that I try to do with my own students. I try to know and ask about what do they do in their lives so that I can make analogies that are going to make sense to them. Also, riding isn't something that you just work on while you're riding. It needs to be interwoven into all sorts of thoughts and lots of noticing moments. For example, I remember doing a clinic with Karen Rolfe, and her telling us to go back to our hotel rooms or Verbos or whatever and brush our teeth with the opposite hand. And now I am a very dominant right-handed person. Like, ambidextrous is not in my vocabulary. And what she wanted us to notice was if we switch hands at some point through the process. And if we did we notice where we did it? Well, of course, I did, and still to this day, unless I'm conscious about brushing my teeth fully with my left hand, there is always a point, and I know where it is, that I will switch back to my right hand. But this was something that I had to really be thinking about and notice. And normally when we are brushing our teeth, we are not thinking about brushing our teeth, right? Because it's something that we just do. But it was important for me to have this lesson. It was important for me to notice that these little bitty things make a huge difference. You need to be able to switch off. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't go writing and doing, occasionally I will attempt. I had to stutter there because that's how difficult it is. I will try to draw with my left hand. I very rarely ever tried to make letters. I will also try to do other activities with my left hand that I wouldn't normally do. And I'm not saying I do this every day in every situation. There's just times when I have trained my brain, hey, try this. And I like to think now that my brain is trained to it and knows why I do it, that my brain is like, this would be a good time to try that. I don't know if I'm that smart or not, but anyway, that's what I go with. Training your brain to do those little things. Another thing is notice which hip do you stand on, lean on, prop yourself up on, right? That's probably your heavy hip when you're riding. So if you can just, when you're standing around talking to a coworker, plop yourself onto the other hip, just to notice it and make that change, gets those neurons firing and gets you thinking about your position and your balance, even when you're not in the saddle. It will make a big, big difference in your riding. I mean, there are lots of exercises out there that help with balance and lots of gadgets that claim to get you better balance. But we still find it to be a very elusive concept. So what is missing in finding the balance? Because if it was easy to achieve, there wouldn't be all of these exercises, tools, and gadgets out there. And as riding instructors, we wouldn't be preaching all of the time about balance. And as life coaches, people wouldn't be telling people all of the time that they needed to find balance. So what are we missing? Over the years, I've come to realize that I think what we're missing is the noticing of not being in balance. And so we just keep not being balanced. We make some compensations, we make some concessions, and we just go on without noticing that we're not balanced or we're skewing off one way or the other. And when I started riding at 8 years old, I had pretty good balance, naturally. I mean, I definitely had some fearful moments, definitely fell off, but I think I was pretty easily balanced and felt safe for whatever reason on a horse, and my instructors also seemed to feel that way. So I don't really ever remember there being conversations about noticing things about balance. And of course, I'm also 8 years old, so it's probably not the conversation that riding instructors were having with kids at that time. I do remember doing lots of no stirrup work, no rein work, no reins, no stirrups, on the flat, and jumping. We did all of those things, and I think they were really wonderful, and they helped me feel comfortable and confident and balanced on a horse. But it wasn't until I consciously started riding bridleless that I began to notice how much I was actually using the reins, even when I wasn't using them. And I won't say that it came in a flash. It wasn't just like the first day I sat there with no bridle and I was like, oh, this is what happens. It came on gradually. And what I used to do was I would put the halter on my horse and tie up some rope reins to my saddle. Sometimes I might use some tools like 2 sticks, and sometimes I would try to go without. And I started to notice things about not having the reins and how my body was helping me or hindering me. Then I really started to notice more things about my horse and how the horse was going and when he might change direction, when he might take a misstep. Those things started to become more of something that I was conscious of and aware of and that I noticed. I remember I went to pick up the canter and it was a bit of a struggle for whichever lead it was. And I realized that it was my hip and my body that was in the way of my horse getting his shoulder up and making this canter depart. And I thought to myself, well, that explains why you always have a difficult time doing a flying lead change into this direction. So it was just little things like that that started to build up and I started to notice. And it's funny because this actually happened one time when I decided to ride bareback and bridleless. I hadn't noticed it when I was riding in the saddle. But when I took the saddle away as well, it became really clear. And I thought, wasn't that funny? I used to ride a lot bareback as a kid. But we always had, usually a halter and a lead rope tied up as reins. So even though I was riding bareback, I still had something to hold on to. And it became really clear to me that that is something that is so important for people. We love to have things to hold on to, right? Whether it's physical or mental. The first thing that people want their babies to do is grab their finger, right? And so every time we feel not balanced, we're going to reach out and grab onto something that's familiar and we think is going to save our life. So from then on, I just really started to notice more. And I was very lucky in having Karen Rolfe coaching me a lot at that point. And she's very good at getting you to notice things and tune in to things that you might not have otherwise noticed. And so that became just like second nature to me. I just started to notice. I cannot say enough about how much that has helped me with horses, how much it's helped me with my riding. Now, it's helped me with my snowboarding too. As you probably heard in the lesson, Felicitas mentioned that a couple times to me about snowboarding, because that is another activity that I do, but I didn't learn how to snowboard until I was an adult. So it was a different learning experience than learning to ride. What that did was it made me more cognizant of the learning process. Now, my instructor, when I first learned and learned well, because I had a couple bumpy goes in the beginning, but then I had a good instructor, and he was very much about the techniques of snowboarding and then also the feel that you had on the board. But I don't remember him talking about noticing things so much. And of course, I was also, at this point, I was a young adult, like 20. So, at 20, we're not exactly the most mature, noticing individuals on the planet. As I began to snowboard more and more, and my journey with the horses was growing more and more and changing, I started to notice things on the snow. I would notice when the board would be, bouncy, or notice, in the places where there's ice underneath. Or I also started to notice things about other aspects of my life when work would be very stressful, when I was working full-time as a 911 dispatcher, noticing that I can come out to the barn and I can ride a horse and I can totally disengage all of that, right? I put all of that away and I can focus on my horse. And I would maybe not feel that great when I got started, but because I was cognizant that my feeling was going to affect the horse and my emotional balance was going to affect my horse, I could notice that and I could work through it. Now, fast forward to having 2 kids who are only 18 months apart, and they're both boys, and not ever having planned on being a stay-at-home mom. I was not trained to be a stay-at-home mom because my mom was definitely not a stay-at-home mom. That is a hard thing that I deal with now, trying to disengage from. I can still go out and get on a horse or go teach a lesson, and that will clear my mind. Sometimes I notice if I'm just going to teach, like I may start off kind of slow or in this funk of like, I don't even know what I'm going to do today because I'm mentally exhausted. But what will happen is that as I get into the flow and I notice the energy of the horse and the rider, and we get going and I start my process of noticing what's happening in their dynamics, then I can get into the mindset of getting into their flow and helping them along. So how does this all relate to balance, right, in riding? Well, balance is something that we have to notice and seek in all aspects of our lives. So while I notice things in the saddle better, what I will notice is that if I'm having an off day, I haven't ridden consistently for some time because kids have been sick or kids have been out of school or something like that happens, then I notice my balance may be a little off. I may feel a little weird in the saddle. Sometimes, just like going to teach a lesson, and maybe I don't feel as engaged as I normally would when the lesson starts. Same thing when I'm stuck at home for days because kids are sick, it snows, whatever. Noticing that I am stuck in a mindset and stuck in a pattern that's not balanced is important. And I can tell you that I'm not that good at it. What I have learned in my riding and working with horses journey, I'm actually putting into practice into life. I know that with horses, I do it well. With other people, I do it pretty well. With myself, not so good. This is all about noticing where my balance is on point and where it isn't. And so as you're riding and you're maybe wondering about testing your balance, right? Like in this lesson, Felicitas had me standing up in the stirrups, and I love this exercise. I do it with students quite frequently. And when you do that, do you feel like, can you do that? Number one. Number two, when you do that, do you feel secure? Do you feel like you change something? When you go standing, do you change your foot position? Do you change your rein position? When you come back down, how do you come back down? Do you come back smoothly? Do you use your body to bring you back down? Do you balance on the rein to bring you back into the saddle quietly? And these are all little things that you don't have to just stand up in the saddle to start noticing. You can start noticing them on your own as you are on your everyday rides. You just have to train your brain to be aware, to have that ability to notice. And unfortunately, what happens is a lot of people who take lessons frequently are in this mindset of, I do what the trainer tells me to do. Then they're trying to, when they're on their own, they're trying to recreate the same aids, but they may not be in the same situations. The horse may not be in the same place it was. Then what happens is you're causing a lot of confusion and losing the balance, right? Not just your physical balance, but the mental, emotional balance there with the horse, because they're not sure why are we doing this. So instead of trying to recreate what you hear in your lessons, try to notice what's happening with your horse. Notice what's happening with your body. And horses get stuck in these unbalanced patterns too, right? Like in this particular lesson, Namaste was very nervous. He's nervous around new people. He's nervous around new indoor arenas in particular. And so he's kind of stuck in a pattern. And by having me change my balance and how I'm balancing him from on top of him, got him to change his mindset and start to sort of break the pattern of imbalance that he has around these situations. I hope thinking about balance in this way is helpful. Start to notice what's happening within your own body as you ride. Can you notice what is happening in your horse's body? Can you change your focus and do nothing except notice? When you start focusing on noticing, what happens to the balance? Now, can you use your intention to manipulate it? Have fun with this. Make it a playful exercise. Don't get too serious about it. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Come Ride With Me. My goal is to demonstrate to riders that we don't have to do something every second of a ride. We don't have to do things a certain way or at a certain time. Just staying present with your horse and gathering non-judgmental information about how they are going is way more beneficial than overthinking and overworking. If you'd like to learn more about what I do at Equus Enlightened, you can find me at equisenlightened.net or on patreon.com/equisenlightened. You can also find me on social media as Equus Enlightened. I will put all the links in the show notes. And until next time, happy riding. Oh, before you go, please remember to rate, review, and share this pod so others can find it. I would love constructive criticism, but like my mom used to say, if you don't have anything really nice to say, there's no need to say it. Just ride on, my friends. Have a great week.